The patrol did not return. The search ended with one set of tracks and no person. A standard-issue field journal was recovered from an abandoned pack. Pages numbered, ink intact. The last entry unfinished. Location recorded as the Bitterroot Range, near the Aspen Creek clearing. Coordinates verified. Weather clear. The final evidence was a single boot print, centered in open ground, heel set, toe forward. No continuation in any direction, no scuff, no slide, no disturbance beyond the mark. Search radius expanded, nothing followed. The record closes on that impression. The ground does not explain it. The Bitterroot Range spans the border between Montana and Idaho like a jagged spine. It's a remote expanse of lodgepole pine, glacial valleys, and ridgelines that receive less than a dozen visitors per season. Even in summer, the higher elevations remain cold at night. By late October, the first snows begin to settle across the passes. This is not recreational land, it's working wilderness, the kind managed by small ranger stations with skeletal staff and long silence between radio checks. In 1987, the Forest Service maintained a network of backcountry patrols through the Bitterroot. These patrols were solo assignments. Rangers would hike a designated loop over 4 to 6 days, checking trail markers, documenting wildlife activity, and filing condition reports upon return. The routes were predictable. The protocols were clear, and in 2 decades of operation, no ranger had ever failed to return. Daniel Corman was assigned to the Northern Loop that October. He was 31 years old, a 6-year veteran of the Forest Service, and regarded by his peers as methodical and reliable. His patrol route covered roughly 40 miles of marked trail, beginning at the Lost Creek trailhead and winding northeast through a series of narrow valleys before looping back south. The terrain was steep in places, but well within his experience level. Weather forecasts called for clear skies and overnight lows in the mid-20s. Corman departed on the morning of October 19th. He carried standard gear, a canvas pack, topographic maps, a handheld radio, and a field journal issued by the station. His estimated return was October 23rd. He did not return. By the evening of October 24th, Station Command initiated a search. A 2-person team was dispatched the following morning to retrace Corman's route. They found his campsite at the 7-mile mark. The tent was collapsed but intact. His sleeping bag was rolled and secured to the outside of his pack, which had been left behind. There was no sign of disturbance. His radio was still inside the pack. It had not been used since his last check-in on the 20th. The search team continued north along the trail. By midday on October 26th, they located boot prints matching Corman's issued footwear. The prints were clear and evenly spaced, moving at a steady walking pace. They followed the trail for another 3 miles, then diverged. The boot prints left the established path and turned west, cutting through underbrush and descending into a shallow drainage. The ground was soft from recent rainfall. Every step was visible. The search team followed the prints for 2 more hours. The tracks moved downhill through dense forest, crossed a dry stream bed, and climbed again toward a flat clearing surrounded by young aspens. And then they stopped. Not at the edge of the clearing, not at a tree line or rocky outcrop. They stopped in the center of the open ground. The final print was a left boot, heel slightly deeper than the toe, as though Corman had paused mid-step. Beyond that, nothing. No further tracks. No signs of departure in any direction. The clearing was approximately 60 feet across, covered in short grass and scattered leaves. Visibility was unobstructed in all directions. The search team circled the perimeter. They expanded their search radius to 200 yards. No additional prints were found. No disturbance in the surrounding soil. No scuff marks, drag patterns, or compression in the grass beyond the final step. A wider search was organized over the next 4 days. 12 personnel combed a 2-mile radius around the clearing. They found nothing, no clothing, no equipment, no human remains. Corman's pack, radio, and tent were recovered from his earlier campsite and returned to the station. On November 3rd, the search was formally suspended. The case was transferred to county records and logged as an unexplained disappearance. No further inquiry was conducted. What follows is a partial transcription of Corman's field journal recovered from his abandoned pack. The journal was standard issue, bound in brown canvas with numbered pages and dated entries. It was found inside a waterproof pouch, undamaged. All entries were handwritten in blue ink. Spelling and punctuation have been preserved as written. October 19th, 1987, 6:45 p.m. First night out. Made decent time today. Covered just over 7 miles and set up camp near the junction with Miners Creek. Weather held steady, no wind. Temperature dropped fast after sundown, but nothing unusual for this time of year. Trail conditions are good. A few downed branches near mile 4, but nothing blocking passage. Marked coordinates and logged them for the report. Saw fresh elk sign near the ridge above camp. Tracks looked recent, maybe this morning. No other wildlife activity to note. Ate a cold dinner. Didn't bother with a fire. Ground is soft from last week's rain, but the tent stakes are holding fine. Radio check at 1800 hours. Signal was clean. Confirmed position and estimated timeline. All clear. Planning to push another 9 miles tomorrow if the weather stays cooperative. Should put me ahead of schedule. No issues. October 21st, 1987, 7:10 p.m. Spent most of the day off trail. Not intentionally. Around mile 12, I noticed something unusual. There was a second set of boot prints running parallel to mine, about 20 feet to the west. At first, I thought it was another hiker, but the prints were identical to mine. Same tread pattern, same stride length, same depth. I stopped and checked my own boots. The match was exact. I assumed I'd loop back on myself somehow, even though the trail had been straight for the last 2 miles. I checked my compass. Bearing was correct. I kept walking. The prints stayed with me. They didn't cross the trail. They didn't diverge. They just followed. Always 20 feet out. Always parallel. I tried to backtrack and see where they started, but after 100 yards or so, they just stopped. No origin point. They simply appeared in the middle of a stretch of clear ground. I radioed in at 1800 hours as scheduled. Didn't mention the prints. Wasn't sure how to explain it. Signal was weaker than usual. Had to repeat my position twice. I'm camped now about a quarter mile past, where I last saw the parallel tracks. I walked the perimeter of this site twice before setting up the tent. No extra prints here. Everything is quiet. October 22nd, 1987. 6:30. I left camp this morning and returned to where I'd seen the parallel tracks yesterday. They were still there, but now there were more. Not just one set running parallel, but 3. All identical to my boot print. All spaced evenly apart, moving in the same direction I'd been walking. I stood there for a long time, trying to make sense of it. The tracks didn't overlap. They didn't converge. They just multiplied. I followed them for about half a mile. They stayed consistent. 3 sets. Always the same distance from each other. Always matching my stride. Then I noticed something else. The tracks weren't just beside the trail anymore. They were ahead of it. I hadn't walked that section yet, but the prints were already there. Same tread, same depth. Leading north toward the ridge I was planning to cross tomorrow, I stopped following them. I turned around and hiked back to the main trail. Decided to stay on course and ignore whatever this was. Made camp early, tried the radio 3 times. No response, just static. I don't know if it's the terrain or the equipment. I'm going to stay put tomorrow and try again in the morning. If I can't get a signal by noon, I'll head back to the station. This doesn't feel right. October 23rd, 1987, 11:20 a.m. I didn't stay put. I woke up just after dawn and the tent was surrounded. Not by animals, by boot prints, my boot prints, dozens of them, circling the tent in concentric rings. Some facing inward, some facing outward. All of them pressed deep into the soft ground, like someone had been standing there for hours. I didn't hear anything during the night. I'm certain I would have heard footsteps that close. I packed quickly, left the tent, started moving south toward the trailhead. The prints followed, not behind me, in front of me. Every few hundred yards, I'd find another set. Always ahead, always leading in the direction I was already going. It's like they know where I'm headed. I tried deviating off trail twice. Both times, the prints were already there waiting. I'm not imagining this. I can see them. I can measure them. They match. I don't know what's happening. Radio is completely dead now. Not even static. Just silence. I'm about 4 miles from the clearing near Aspen Creek. I'll camp there tonight and push hard for the trailhead at first light. I just need to get out. No further entries were recorded. The journal ends on page 17. The remaining pages were blank. Search coordinators and field investigators reviewed Corman's case extensively in the weeks following the suspension. Several explanations were proposed. The first involved hypothermia. Paradoxical undressing and terminal burrowing are well-documented behaviors in hypothermia victims. Disorientation and irrational decision-making often occur in the later stages. However, Corman's gear indicated he was properly equipped for the conditions. His sleeping bag and cold-weather clothing were unused, and daytime temperatures during his patrol ranged between 40 and 50 degrees, well above hypothermic thresholds. A second explanation considered psychological factors. Acute stress or panic can trigger dissociative episodes, particularly in isolated environments. Corman's journal entries suggest increasing distress, but his writing remained coherent. His handwriting showed no signs of tremor or disorganization, and his decision to return to the trailhead was rational. There was no evidence of a mental health crisis prior to his departure. Investigators also examined the possibility of disorientation caused by terrain features. The Bitterroot Range contains areas of magnetic anomaly due to subsurface iron deposits. These anomalies can interfere with compass accuracy and create navigational errors. Corman's described route, however, followed established trails for most of the journey. His deviation occurred only after the journal entries began documenting the boot prints, and the clearing where his tracks ended was easily visible from multiple approach angles. It was not a location where someone could become lost. Infrasound has been studied as a contributing factor in wilderness disappearances. Low-frequency sound waves, typically below 20 Hz, can cause feelings of unease, dizziness, and visual disturbances. These waves occur naturally in certain geographic formations, particularly in narrow canyons or near fast-moving water. The drainage Corman's tracks passed through contained a dry stream bed. No active water source was present. No geological features consistent with infrasound generation were identified in the area. Animal activity was also considered. Large predators such as mountain lions or bears occasionally follow human scent trails. This can create the appearance of deliberate tracking, but Corman's journal described boot prints, not paw prints, and no animal is capable of replicating a human stride pattern with that level of precision. Wildlife scat and fur samples collected during the search showed no unusual predator presence in the area. Each explanation addresses part of the evidence. None of them address all of it. The detail that remains unresolved is the clearing itself. Corman's final boot print was preserved in soft soil. The print was photographed by the search team on October 26th. The depth and angle of the impression indicated a natural walking gait. There was no compression around the print to suggest a jump or sudden movement. There was no scuff or slide to indicate a fall. The ground surrounding the print was undisturbed. If Corman had been lifted or carried from that spot, there would be evidence of additional weight or displacement. If he had walked away, his prints would have continued. If he had run, the stride pattern would have changed. The radius searched around the clearing covered over 12 square miles of terrain. Cadaver dogs were deployed on the fourth day of the search. They found nothing, no scent trail, no remains, no clothing fibers. Soil samples taken from the clearing were analyzed for chemical composition. No abnormalities were detected, no accelerants, toxins, or foreign materials. Weather records from October 23rd show clear skies and light winds, no precipitation, no atmospheric conditions that would obscure or erase tracks. In 1991, a forestry crew working near the same drainage reported finding a torn section of canvas fabric snagged on a low branch. The fabric was consistent with standard-issue Ranger packs from the 1980s. It was located roughly 1 mile west of the clearing. The fabric was weathered and faded. It could not be definitively linked to Corman's equipment. No other items were recovered in the area. The clearing remains accessible. It has been visited multiple times by independent researchers and hiking groups over the years. No additional anomalies have been reported. The site appears ordinary, unremarkable, a flat stretch of ground surrounded by trees. What remains is a set of boot prints that stop, a journal that ends mid-patrol, and a question that does not have an answer. Disappearances in wilderness areas occur more frequently than public records suggest. Most are eventually explained. Search efforts recover remains, or evidence points toward exposure, injury, or animal predation. But some cases resist explanation, not because the explanation is impossible, but because the evidence itself is incomplete. Corman's case is not unique in that regard. What makes it distinct is the precision of the final record. The boot prints were documented, the journal was recovered intact, the search was thorough and methodical, and still, there is no conclusion, only an absence. The Bitterroot file is closed, but the archive remains open. Subscribe to access the next entry.